Hello everybody and welcome to the British GT Esports third race of the season here from the beautiful Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit in Kent. 2.433 miles and 9 corners make up this incredible, iconic and historic racing venue. And to talk you through all the action today is myself, Mr. Paul Jeffrey, and alongside me, Mr. David Addison. Hello sir and welcome.
Paul, thank you very much. Hello everybody, welcome to the Grand Prix circuit at Brands Hatch, welcome to round 3 of the British GT Esports Championship, and welcome to a championship battle that is getting very intense indeed across both GT3 and GT4. And really tonight, bearing in mind it's a short championship, Paul, only 5 rounds, the likes of Angus Fender and Ben Green have somehow got to stem the tide of James Baldwin, haven't they? Because with a second place and a win, in GT3 at least, he has gone scampering ahead on points in the championship. They've got to try and take advantage tonight of the ballast that he carries in order to reduce that points deficit with only 2 more races to go after this one.
Yep, that's exactly right. Baldwin very much the man in form in GT3. But this is the Grand Prix circuit at Brands Hatch, a twisty, tight, difficult track at the best of times. And then we're going to throw into the mix a wild collection of different experiences in the virtual world and our GT4 runners as well. David, this is either going to be spectacular or dramatic, shall we say, I think today.
Or both, I reckon, Paul, or both. I mean, Brands Hatch is very similar in some respects to Oulton Park, which we went to at the start of the championship, in that it's an old school circuit. It's unforgiving. It's narrow. You don't have vast acres of runoff area like we're going to have next week at Silverstone, for example, on the Grand Prix circuit. You can see there the run down towards Hawthorns. That is unchanged, really, since the Grand Prix circuit was constructed. Certainly in terms of the width, there's nothing you can do. You've got trees on either side of it. There's a finite amount of real estate, and that is a part of the circuit where it can bite. Overtaking is not that easy around here. And certainly, as far as the ballast is concerned, with the undulations on the Grand Prix circuit, it's going to hurt. And it means that the 30 kilos carried by James Baldwin, the 15 by Michael O'Brien, and the 10 carried by Ben Green could put them at a disadvantage, certainly at the end of the hour. Just to remind you who we look for in GT3, Tom Canning's TF Sport Aston Martin heads the entry number 1. Ben Green, currently 3rd in the championship, is number 3. Andrew Howard, we've yet to see race, and I don't think he's on the grid tonight either, sadly, but Sam Neary and Angus Fender and James Baldwin and Alex Buncombe and Adam Morgan most definitely are, all of them very, very quick drivers. And of course, Angus Fender and James Baldwin, race winners and with sim experience as well as real world experience. Adam Morgan from the British Touring Car Championship, Alex Buncombe, former Blockpan Endurance Series champion, Liam McNeely, debuted at Snetterton, and Gus Burton has been very quick but unlucky thus far this year. Leo Machitsky doing all of this from his base in Moscow. Ryan Ratcliffe missed out at Snetterton because his internet went down in the bad weather. Bobby Trundley has had an impressive season so far. Sandy Mitchell's been a bit unlucky. Jack Lemmer, based at his university campus, doing all of this, getting quicker all the time, but a bit unlucky as well. He's been roughed up on occasion. Jody Fannin, 3rd at Oulton Park. Morgan Short's been consistent. And Michael O'Brien, unlucky at Oulton, but really quick at Snetterton. Picked up damage. That went against him. He could be a dark horse here at Brands Hatch. But then, Paul, there's the GT4 entry, dripping with star names, and of course a new crop of hot laps qualifiers.
Indeed there is. So the top 10, just to remind everybody from last time out, go through into this race, and then hot lap qualifiers decide who makes up the rest of the field. And Chris Hoke once again is the top name on the list, ahead of Gregor Schill in the BMW M4 GT4. Tarek Gamble, one of our championship contenders, racing under his own name, takes part, as well as Manuel Rodriguez for Team Redline. Mortis Lorna in the Door Esports McLaren 570S GT4, Alexander Doricott, and a new name, Robbie Stapleford for Profile Racing in the Aston Martin Vantage GT4. Jack McIntyre once again returns for Zansho Rocket Simsport in a Porsche, Igor Orognikov in the KTM Expo, and David Michael in the Renwelton Pro Team Genetti G54, and new names. Samir Abrame ahead of Fabien Jean-Blanc in the G-League Mercedes AMG, Michael Kondiak's logo inside Max Motorsports, Josh Hislop racing under his own name. Nils Naujoks, one of our championship contenders, will be once again in the BMW M4. Philip Engman in the McLaren 570S. George Boothbay, winner last time out, incredibly impressive in the Side Max Motorworks car. Ivan Sherman-Tinsky, Chris McDade and Masej Malinowski round out the GT4 runners. And again, David, incredible drivers as we look at GT3 standings.
Yeah, and GT3 is, as I say, James Baldwin's domain at the moment because he's been the most consistent over those two races. Angus Fender second ahead of Ben Green, and it's only 2 points between them. Then you've got Jody Fannin just ahead of Morgan Short. Michael O'Brien next. Now, Michael needs a good result here because he didn't score at Oulton. Sam Neary has been quick but prone to penalties. You get the picture through all of this, that the gap that James Baldwin has is an impressive one, and that needs to be eaten into this evening. So pressure is on the likes of Angus Fender and Ben Green, those BMW drivers, to try to get themselves back into the mix here.
Yeah, very tight at the top of the standings in GT3. Some great racing. And in GT4, it's even tighter still. Nils Naujoks is our joint championship leader from Jack McIntyre, both on 30 points apiece, but Nils Naujoks is carrying 10 kilo success ballast, courtesy of his podium last time out. Luca Burke, 25, 5 points in arrears in third, ahead of new driver George Boothby, straight into the standings in fourth place with 25 to his name. Maciej Malinowski in fifth position, ahead of Chris Hooker in the Audi. Michael Kondaxioglu in seventh. Mortis Lorna in P8, Maxime Batafulier in 9th position, and in 10th is Igor Orognikov, so 30 points down to 8th in the top 10. Ivan Sherman-Tinske will be expecting more from this weekend on 7. In 11th place, Samira Brahme, P12, Chris McDade, 13th, and rounding out the point scorers this season, Eamon Murphy for Yasheet Janetta G55 GT4. So tight, David, in both championships.
Yeah, and GT4, in a sense, is, you could argue, the tougher one to come out on top in, because not only do you have to race well and score well, but you have to make sure you stay in the championship, because one bad race doesn't just cost you points, it potentially means you don't do the next race. You've got to re-qualify. And so it's all about consistency as much as anything in GT4. So actually, the more you look at it, the more you start to appreciate how pressured that GT4 environment really is. So take nothing away from those experienced sim racers. They are not having an easy time of it, that is for certain. So we're almost good to go racing. The drivers are being asked to rejoin the server. We are about 3 minutes away, and very shortly that pit straight at Brands Hatch is going to become very busy indeed, with the cars grilling up based on what we had a little while ago in the qualifying session that should put Jody Fannin, in fact, onto pole position within the GT3 element. And for GT4, the best time in the qualifying session earlier on went to Tarek Gamil with the Porsche 718. Now, just to make the point, Paul, about the importance of staying competitive in GT4, Luca Berg, winner of the opening race at Oulton Park, third in the championship, isn't doing this race because he's not scored well enough in the didn't finish well enough in the last round. So third in the championship, he's going to have to try and re-qualify for the next round.
Yeah, and that's a big loss for Luca Burke. 25 points are on offer for a race victory in each of these races. It's the penultimate round at Silverstone next weekend, next Sunday, so put a date in your diary, folks at home, for that one. So Luca will be very disappointed. A bad race at Snetterton, non-qualification for Brands Hatch. It's going to make the job of finishing highly in the standings very, very difficult indeed. And David, you hit the nail on the head. It's outright pace is one thing, racecraft is an entirely different thing altogether, but it's also dealing with that pressure, isn't it? Knowing that you've got to perform, otherwise your championship chances are thrown away in one bad event.
Absolutely right. And the GT4 drivers, the likes of Nils Naujoks, of course, although Nils was pretty miffed at the end of Snetterton to get roughed up, Adam Morgan ran out of fuel, got in the way, there was an incident, and Nils was quite vocal in the driving standards critique of some of the GT3 people who aren't necessarily sim racing regulars. It wasn't Adam's fault, it was a genuine drama, running out of fuel, and therefore suddenly the car stopped and got in his way. But you know, Nils Naujoks is back, but 2 third places, at least it's consistency, and at least it not only keeps him race by race within the championship, but actually, of course, coming into the race here, Nils Naujoks is the joint GT4 championship leader. So you don't have to be winning all the time to do well in the championship, but you do have to be consistent and consistently up at the pointy end.
We do, and actually I'd like to talk about Nils Naujoks a little bit. I spoke to him midweek, and the BMW that Nils drives for, he drives for the G2 Esports BMW Works team. It's not the quickest car in GT4, so due to the bot and the balance of performance, the way the car is designed and behaved, it gives away a little bit of lap time to some of his immediate rivals. but also throw it into the mix the way this championship is structured. Our drivers, as you said, carry success ballast. It's not cumulative, so the top 3, 30, 15 and 10 each round. Now York's a top driver, so he's always sniffing around that region. He will get a little bit of success ballast like he does today, but then when the new qualifiers come in from the hot lap competition, they can arguably pick cars that are naturally a little bit quicker, and also they don't have success ballast. So for somebody like a Nils Naujoks or a forerunner in the championship, they're always going to be a step behind at a disadvantage to some of these top drivers that are coming in. We saw Boothby winning last time out as a new name. So that's doubly difficult for the GT4 drivers, David, in that they've got the challenges of the cars that they represent, but also potentially new influx of fast drivers in faster cars each weekend to contend with, which must be incredibly difficult from the mental point of view.
Yeah, and anybody that thinks that this is a soft option of going motor racing, that this is in some way lesser than real world racing, needs to really wake up and understand what the championship is all about. I mean, you know, lots of us from the real world of motorsport, Paul, as you know, are coming into your world and being educated into sim racing and having our eyes opened all the time. And I suppose the first thing that you're appreciating is how good the graphics are, but then you dig a bit deeper and you learn even more. And the point you make is absolutely right. As we have a look at the front of the GT3 grid then, with JD Fannin lining up alongside James Baldwin. The second row, we've got Sandy Mitchell there with Michael O'Brien for company. Then it is Alex Buncombe on the third row with Morgan Short alongside him. Angus Fender's BMW, the Oulton Park winner, comes next, and then Ben Green. So those are the two BMWs to watch going after James Baldwin, who is heavier but much further up the grid ahead of them. Bobby Trundley next with the Aston Martin. Adam Morgan's Sicily Mercedes is ahead of Tom Canning's purple Aston Martin. There is Sam Neary's ABBA Racing Mercedes good to go, ahead of Liam McNeely and then Gus Burton with 77 Jack Lemmer and 63 Lamborghini, that of Liam Chitsky, to round out the GT3 elements of the grid. And then we get to all the drama in GT4.
Yep, GT4, Tarek Gamel, our pole sitter in the Porsche on the left-hand side of your screen, ahead of Nils Naujoks in second position. In third is Gregor Schill, so two BMWs in the top 3 with Jack McIntyre in the 718 Porsche P4. In fifth position, we've got Mortis Lorna in the McLaren. In sixth position, George Boothby ahead of Chris McDade in the Chevrolet. Next up on the grid is Samir Ibrahimi in the Audi, with Manuel Rodriguez ahead of new starter Stapleford in the number 26 slot. Igor Rognikov lines up next on the grid alongside Maciej Milanoski. Chris Hoke in 29th overall ahead of new driver Jean Blanc in 30th position. The longest name in sim racing, Michael Kondaxloglu in 31st against Igor Shermatinsky. Engerman 33rd on the grid, Doricott P34, Michael in the back row of the grid, and rounding out our runners is Hislop 36th and last on the grid with 2 minutes and 30 seconds until we go green flag.
So then the cars are just about good to go. As I say, everybody has rejoined the server, this full grid that stretches all the way back to the top of the Brabham Straight at Brands Hatch, the Grand Prix circuit. Of course, Brands Hatch, when it opened, was a grass track circuit. It was only what's now known as the Indy circuit, and initially it was run in the opposite direction. But these days it's been, of course, the former home to the British Grand Prix. It's still a very, very active circuit with international GT racing coming, the GT World Challenge Europe coming here at the end of August now in the rejigged calendar, and that is a fabulous view looking down onto the circuit as we get set ready to go racing. Now, picking a winner out of all of this I think is going to be very difficult indeed, but even with the extra weight, you've got to give James Baldwin really, I suppose, the heads up, haven't you? He remains, partly because of his real world experience, certainly because of his world's fastest gamer accolade, he remains the benchmark driver, and even with these 30 kilos of extra weight, he's on the front row of the grid. What's to say that he's not going to be a race winner once again? He does seem to be very much the driver that they have all got to aim for. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, they do indeed. I mean, James is second on the grid for this race, Jody Fannin, our pole position man, but there's only 1/10 of a second covering the front two starters. And in fact, there's only a second covering the entirety of the top 10. And we saw in that shot, David, didn't we, with a beautiful overlane shot of Brands Hatch. This is a very compact circuit, so traffic will play a part as well. And it'll be interesting to see, with 30 kilos on board that McLaren, how can James keep his car alive during the course of the stint, and will he get involved in traffic?
Very good point. Michael O'Brien carries 15 kilos of weight and Ben Green 10. In GT4, George Boothby carries 30, Jack McIntyre 15. Now, a word about Jack in a moment. Niels Naujok's 10 kilos of weight. Jack McIntyre has been really impressive as well. He's another of those good, quick, consistent drivers. He's been perhaps unlucky not to have a win, but certainly it could be on the cards here. He did a ripper job at Snetterton. He was very impressive at Oulton Park, so that maiden win cannot be far away. And of course, he also comes to this third round of the championship as the joint GT4 championship leader with Niels Naujok. So it's a really fierce fight between those two in terms of points, and it was so on the track, wasn't it, for that last half of the Snetterton race, as the green flag is about to drop and the car's set to be released onto the formation lap, ready to get round 3 of the British GT Esports Championship underway.
Yeah, there's been some incredibly entertaining racing in both classes so far this season. And David, this is the third race of the championship now, third of 5. And a lot of our GT3 drivers will have got infinitely more experience racing in a competitive online environment than they started the year. This has got to be the biggest test. We see a Lamborghini stationary off the start, but he's got it rolling again, so he'll catch himself back up. He's allowed to in the regulations. He can catch up his spot. A little bit of a stall off the start-finish straight, but it's downhill at Brands, David, so he's okay.
Yeah, that was Sandy Mitchell, the reigning British GT champion, having a brief aberration, but he's got the car going, as you say, Paul. He's away. The Porsche 718 Cayman of Tarek Gamil then on pole in GT4, effectively replacing Luca Burke, isn't he, as the second of the Cayman drivers and therefore the best of the qualifiers. So he comes into this a bit like George Boothby did at Snetterton, ballast free, and bangs the car onto pole position. So Tarek Gamil has got to be the man to beat straight away in GT4, but Niels Naujok with that BMW is going to take the fight to him very definitely, as also of course Jack McIntyre from the second row of the grid and Gregor Schill, another of the Hot Laps qualifiers there, lining up on the second row. So GT4 as ever has got lots to look forward to. Sandy Mitchell, we're being told, does have an issue. It was more than just a stall, and he's going to have to start the race from the pit lane. So Sandy Mitchell is in strife, as you look at Jody Fannin there, making his way around the Grand Prix part of the circuit. So Sandy Mitchell is going to have to start from the pit lane rather than the second row, and of course, therefore, is going to be absolutely stone last into the first corner.
Yeah, that's a real shame for Sandy Mitchell. He's a little bit further down the running order in terms of championship standings in P8 with just 8 points against his name, but progressively he's been showing more and more speed in that Lamborghini. So Mitchell got a lot of work ahead of him in this race. And David, trying to get round Brands Hatch Grand Prix through the GT4s, fighting for position, that's going to be a work of art in its own right.
Absolutely so, and he is struggling then, so Sandy Mitchell, fingers crossed, he's going to be able to make some progress. Leo Michitsky was a driver that had to start from the pits at Snetterton, having never raced there before, and was therefore fascinated to see where you could overtake. It was all useful experience for when he does race there in the real world, as the drivers now get themselves in the formation, the Noah's Ark 2x2 style formation, ready for the rolling start. It's Jody Fannin's Ferrari on the inside line. It is the McLaren on the outside line of the grid then, James Baldwin's car, as they make the run slowly now up through Clark Curve. 1 hour of racing then set to get underway here at Brands Hatch on the Grand Prix circuit. The second row was Sandy Mitchell. Then you've got Michael O'Brien lining up on the outside. Sandy Mitchell now having to start from the pits after his drama, and as the cars then now accelerate up towards the timing line, the lights will go green. We go racing, and a good start by Jody Fannin, a good start by Morgan Short as well on the outside line in the McLaren as they plunge into paddock for the first time. James Baldwin tries to go around the outside of Jody Fannin, he can't do it, and Alex Buncombe comes up to threaten on the run up towards Druids for the first time. You've got Michael O'Brien in the mix as well, so the Team Rocket RJN McLaren's all getting themselves together. Angus Fender bounces off the side of Morgan Short, rally crosses his way downhill. Angus Fender in a big hurry to try to reach the front, but he's off on the grass again. Short's all sideways, and was that Ben Green getting crossed up and going off the road behind them as well? Certainly one of the Works liveried cars. Yes, it was Ben Green in strife as there. Gus Burton goes through, and more contact as there. A big whack turns around Sam Neary.
Oh, drama throughout the field in GT3. Neary facing the right direction once again, so only lost a few places out on the circuit. The fight for GT4 as well, as you can see, your picture in picture has been a little bit cleaner, and Tarek Gamil retains race lead from pole position, but just as we anticipated, drama right from the green flag.
Michael O'Brien is also making progress there, because he's got himself up into second place at the expense of James Baldwin. So Michael O'Brien in a lighter car. He's still got to carry 15 kilos, but he's taking the fight to Jody Fannin. But of course, in so doing, he's taking points away from his teammate. So at the moment, no team orders being suggested as the cars then fall for the lead, plunge into Clark Kerr for the first time up towards the timing line. Ferrari versus McLaren, and Jody Fannin is about to get swamped, isn't he? Up to the outside line comes Michael O'Brien. So Jody having qualified fastest of all. Michael O'Brien fourth on the grid. Michael goes to the outside line, tries to make the move as they come off the corner. Jody Fannin under attack from James Baldwin on the inside line. Who does he defend from? On the outside at Druids is O'Brien. Jody Fannin tries to brave it out. He just about hangs on to the lead, but as they drop downhill, Michael O'Brien's going to be on the inside line. That should give him the lead, and it does. And now Jody Fannin in danger of being mugged by the other two McLarens. But look at Angus Fender. He is in fifth place and very much now, Paul, part of that leading battle.
Absolutely incredible. Buncombe as well in the third McLaren, trying to find a way past James Baldwin. So it's all going wrong in the early stages for our championship leader, James Baldwin, now being relegated down to fourth position. Fender around the outside, David.
Down towards Hawthorne, has a look on the outside line, can't quite do it there, but he's got the run going up towards Westfield. The BMW on the inside line of James Baldwin. It's not only for the place, it is for the points in the championship, all of this, but Fender gets crossed up and goes onto the grass. Baldwin survives the moment. Adam Morgan further back here is currently running in sixth place. Adam going really well, the Morganator coming towards Sterling's this time, inching up onto the back of Angus Fender. So we're only on lap 2 and high drama already as we get Michael O'Brien into the lead of the race, and slightly mystifying as to where the pace disappeared to for Jody Fannin. Quickest in qualifying, but he couldn't fend off the challenge of the McLarens. Now, what about GT4? It's a Porsche 1-2 at the moment by the look of it. Tarek Gamil just ahead as they drop down now towards the end of the lap. No, Niels Naujoks, in fact, is ahead of all of this battle pack. So Niels Naujoks is ahead. Then Tarek Gamil is in second place. Niels Naujoks trying to get away from the pack as we look at the GT3 contingent. Morgan's made a mistake at paddock. Bobby Tranley gets ahead of him up at Druids. You don't know where to look, Paul, do you?
Absolutely sensational stuff in these opening 4 minutes of the third round of the British GT Esports Series. Morgan making that mistake, losing place to Bobby Trunley, and now Tom Cannon. In fact, no, Morgan short in the beautiful liveried McLaren, trying to find a way past that Sicily Motorsport Mercedes. But let's have a look. This is Tarek Gamil, our pole sitter, remember, new into the championship, yet to score in the classification for GT4, chasing down race leader Niels Naujoks as Leo Maciuski in yet another new livery recovers back onto the circuit once again. But Tarek Gamil, kicking himself, no weight in that Porsche, and is lost out to Naujoks in second position.
Leo Maciuski then off the road and back on. Sam Neary and Gus Burton both being given drive-throughs. We'll get to the bottom of why in a moment, because news is coming, but it could be for a start issue. So Sam Neary and Gus Burton, poor old Gus yet again is in strife. Sam Neary is not a complete novice when it comes to penalties, and it was a jump start confirmed by race control. So jump start for Sam Neary and Gus Burton. A drive-through penalty comes. So Niels Naujoks here hanging onto the GT4 lead, but wait, GT3 traffic there. Ben Green comes blasting through. He was 19th at the start of the lap, and he's now up to 16th place.
And isn't that a great shot to show the difference in speed between GT3 and GT4? The closing speed, especially on a circuit like Brands Hatch Grand Prix, is incredible. And our drivers, they've probably got another 10 minutes or so in GT4 before they start worrying about traffic. But Niels Naujoks looks very vulnerable at the moment.
He does, because it's a ballast-free car behind him. Now, this is Morgan versus Morgan, isn't it? Adam Morgan ahead of Morgan Short. The Mercedes ahead of the McLaren, masquerading as a Mosler in the retro livery. And a big moment up at the top of the hill. Chris Herker in the Audi gets involved with, I think that's Maciej Malinowski. So 2 quick drivers in GT4 in strife there, Paul.
Oh, that's a real shame. Herker and Malinowski making contact on the exit of Druids. And if I'm just looking at the championship standings real quick, they are very much in the fight for the championship, 5th and 6th respectively. But Tom Canning were riding on board now, chasing down that Mosler S McLaren, and these three are starting to turn into quite the fight.
Absolutely so, and of course Adam Morgan, who's getting better and better all the time in a GT3 simulated Mercedes, hanging on to the place. As there, look, you see Tarek Gamil losing out to Moritz Lerner, so the McLaren goes through up into second place, and all of a sudden Gamil, who qualified on the class pole position, is coming under renewed attack, because now Gregor Schill, hot laps qualifier in the BMW, is right on his tail. So in theory, this Cayman that should be leading its class by dint of being the lightest car from the qualifying session, the quickest car from the qualifying session, is now looking very vulnerable indeed.
He is indeed. Tarek Gamel, very, very fast driver. We've seen him in many different esport competitions over the years. Maybe just getting settled into the championship a little bit, not wanting to cause too much controversy in the opening laps. Just bed his Porsche 718 in as we're looking at Jack McIntyre now. McIntyre up the inside of the Aston Martin, too wide through Paddock Hill. Can he get it closed down into Druids, into the braking zone? He's got the inside line, which is the place to be. And yes, he does. Jack McIntyre moves up a position.
Does indeed. So Jack Mack goes ahead then of George Boothby as they come down the hill. George in a heavier car, but Jack McIntyre is still lugging around 15 kilos. Now up front, Michael O'Brien not only leads, but he's getting away, despite touching the dirt there, from Jody Fannin as they swoop into Stirling's. Once more, Alex Buncombe runs third. So fourth is James Baldwin, but Angus Fender, who was right with them, has dropped quite a long way back and needs to somehow try and get back into the mix. Remember, when we last looked, he was part of that battle pack, got himself a bit crossed up and slithered off the road briefly, but he is nowhere near now being able to stay with them, it seems, as they come now up towards Paddock. So O'Brien leads Fannin, third is Buncombe, fourth is Baldwin, up towards Druids. They really need, as far as Angus Fender is concerned, to hold each other up by squabbling. That's the only way, seemingly, he's going to get back into the mix right now.
It is, and Buncombe very squirrely on the exit of Druids. He's moving the car around on the racetrack a heck of a lot behind the back of Jody Fannin, just filling the mirrors at that Ferrari, but that's going to overheat his tyres. He'll have to be careful, will Alex Buncombe, not to compromise his stint further down the running order. And James Baldwin, ever the professional, ever the intelligent driver, is just keeping a watching brief, letting these two slow each other up and looking for a good opportunity to get past.
Now, what about Angus Fender in terms of lap times? 1.3 seconds back at the moment, and let's have a look at the dramas that befell Ben Green on the opening lap of the race. Now, this all kicked off coming out of Druids. Angus Fender was on the grass, Morgan Short had a go. There's number 3 Ben Green's BMW on the inside, and bang, he clashed with Morgan Short, slithered across the grass, but thankfully avoided the Armco.
Yeah, it's a real shame for Ben Green. You can see exactly what he was doing. Saw a gap starting to open up on the racetrack, thinking, yes, that's the easiest overtake of the season for me, 2 positions. And sadly, Short comes back to the inside, makes contact. And when your car's so finely balanced like that, David, it only takes such a light piece of contact to spin you around.
And of course, you're struggling with cold tyres, but that has been looked at and deemed a racing incident. So no action against either driver. It's just one of those things. There is Morgan Short, 8th in 88, chasing after Adam Morgan as they go now up through Paddock Hill Bend towards Druids. O'Brien still leading from Jody Fannin. Now Angus Fender, 1.7 seconds back in 5th place. He could be the man to keep an eye to, at least. I'm not saying he's going to close yet. Bearing in mind the other element to all of this that we haven't really touched on yet, Paul, is of course the pit window. When do you make your pit stop? And around here, being released back into traffic could be really significant indeed, couldn't it?
I think that's a really good point, actually, David. I think so far as the 3rd race of the season, this is going to be the most critical track for when you take your pit window. Traffic, no matter when you stop, will be incredibly busy, and it's minimising that time loss is going to be critical to a good race come the checkered flag, a good position, come the checkered flag.
2 different race winners in both classes thus far. Can we get a 3rd different winner in each? Well, right now, yes is the answer, because in GT4 it is Niels Naujoks, in GT3 it remains the McLaren of Michael O'Brien as they're diving down through the left-hander of Graham Hill Bend is Tarek Gamel on the tail of Moritz Lerner, all of which is playing into the hands of Niels Naujoks, isn't it? Because he's getting away as this 3-way fight with now Gregor Schill latching on the back of the Porsche. They're all holding one another up by squabbling. In the background, you've got Jack McIntyre, 20th overall, 5th in class. And again, Jack Mack is another man in a big hurry to try to catch this group of cars. But right now, Niels Naujoks having perhaps an easier time than he has had in the previous 2 races in either stint as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what Niels Naujoks needed in this race. He needed to get some clean air at the front of the circuit, let the cars behind squabble, which very much Tarek Gamel is trying to get that squabble up and running with Moritz Lerner in 2nd position so far. Gamel, the middle car of the shot, the red Porsche, and this is just what our race leader Niels Naujoks needs. Keep the car nice and calm, bring the tyres in nice and easily, and get a gap, as we've got a whole gaggle of cars here, David, fighting for the same piece of real estate.
And the other good thing about this is you've got so many different shapes and sizes. Look, KTM ahead of Ginetta, ahead of what's next in the queue, the Chevrolet, then the Alpine, then a McLaren, then an Audi. So down they come through the right-hander of Clark Curve, and Gus Burton has been disqualified, I notice, according to the timing tower. The car is in the pit lane, but he got a drive-through, but that's now turned into disqualification, interestingly. Not had all to do with the ping rate, I gather, a high ping rate, and therefore a technical issue has put him out of the race. Poor old Gus, he has no luck whatsoever, does he? Right, there, recovering after his early spin, Maciej Malinowski in that very pretty Alpine, and he in turn now, Malinowski, is going after the number 58 Ginetta of another of our hot laps qualifiers, that of Josh Hislop.
Yeah, Malinowski recovering nicely indeed, a very fast driver. We've seen plenty of him so far this season. He knows how to race, he knows how to lap, and he knows how to overtake. But it's going to be an incredible challenge here at the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit, just as James Baldwin, our championship leader, is finding 4th position. Can we believe Baldwin has dropped to 4th? But what's more, he's not harrowing the back of the cars in front particularly.
No, he's not. He's banking points, assuming he stays where he is. Just confirmation that after an incident on lap 1, David Michel's Ginetta is being given a drive-through penalty for an incident that involved also number 21, that being Alexander Doricott, who is in his second race because he was new for Snetterton. Now, as far as James Baldwin is concerned, this might be a master plan. Cope with the weight as best you can, see what you can do and push harder in that second stint. We'll have a word about pit stops in a moment because we're getting closer to the pit window. But of course, there's another element to all of this, which is that 4th place is pretty good for banking points, but it also means you shed the ballast for the next race on the very flat and fast Silverstone Grand Prix circuit. So that could be a master plan for James, who knows exactly what he's doing. Now, pit stops, Paul, quick word about those as we head towards the pit window. You have got to think about tyres and fuel in those pit stops, haven't you?
You do indeed. It's a mandatory pit stop, so you must stop at least once during the pit window, which is 10 minutes in duration. Drivers have got to put at least a litre of fuel into the car. They don't have to change tyres if they don't wish. You may want to, but it will mean just stop at your pits longer than some of your rivals, as Robbie Stapleford now getting a good slipstream down the back of the sister Aston Martin. So when that pit window opens, we've seen a real mix, David, so far this year of people jumping down pit lane immediately or leaving it to the very last possible moment. And at Brands Hatch, I don't think any of them's a particularly good option. It's just which is the least bad.
True enough, yes. And right now, you do not want to get involved in a GT4 fight like this, do you? Where you've got Robbie Stapleford hard at work. What's going on in GT3? Well, Sandy Mitchell, of course, is a driver that's been trying to attack and get up through the order after his dramas at the start. And Sandy Mitchell, fair play to him, is in 12th spot overall, and he's about to become 11th, possibly, because there he is right up behind Ben Green. BMW versus Lamborghini, the real-world British GT champion, goes to the outside line, and the young Scottish driver Sandy Mitchell now tries to make a move. Behind is Liam McNeely, and he has just copped a drive-through penalty as well. Ben Green keeps at bay Sandy Mitchell, but Ben goes out wide, and Sandy Mitchell goes through on the inside at Westfield. Tick, job done, place gained, up to 11th from the pit lane, and last at the start of the race. This is some drive.
Absolutely fabulous from Mitchell. We've seen now Stapleford getting involved with the Aston Martin ahead of him, makes the position. Tick, flash of the lights behind just to show his displeasure is George Boothby overtaken, and now Boothby has got McDade in the bright green Chevrolet to contend with, and basically the entirety of the rest of the GT4 field all squirreling around trying to find a little bit of clear road. And if I was George Boothby, I would be feeling vulnerable at this moment in time, because that Chevrolet is big and heavy and can go through that car like a knife through wet paper.
And of course also George Boothby having to cope with not only a different sort of battle, but also ballast as side by side the McLarens in the traffic. So that now brings James Baldwin back into the mix, does it, as they drop down? Yes, it does. Goes through, and Jody Fannin in second place in the Ferrari under attack. So Baldwin ahead of Buncombe then as they come now into Westfield, and job done. James Baldwin goes through, but he goes out wide. Is that going to give Alex Buncombe an opportunity to fight back? Let's see as they come now up towards the run towards Stirling's then. So the McLarens making good progress all of a sudden, and I think the traffic has had quite a big part in this now as they come down towards the right-hander heading into Clark Curve. Is it still Michael O'Brien good in the race lead? Looked like it is. We'll confirm this when they come across the line, because you've got very similarly liveried McLarens. The livery of the Ferrari of Jody Fannin is not dissimilar either. And so as they come up now to break the beam, it is Michael O'Brien in the lead of the race. Jody Fannin is a second back. James Baldwin is up to third, and Alex Buncombe was the one that lost out on that lap. He is down in fourth place, but Jody Fannin and the race leader Michael O'Brien, and they're the McLarens third and fourth of Baldwin and Buncombe, now having to really cope with the traffic. Buncombe is the one that's lost out the most, but James Baldwin now, that sim racing experience suddenly shows, Paul, doesn't it?
It does. Baldwin looks considerably more comfortable in this hectic traffic situation that we're finding ourselves in. Great driving alongside Alex Buncombe, fighting tooth and nail for position. But Baldwin has brushed that move off immediately and got straight onto the back of the Ferrari of Jody Fannin ahead. So Baldwin looking a little bit more comfortable, but once again gets balked running into the back end of the circuit, and Buncombe starts to close back up again. And it's given me a headache watching this, so I've no idea how the drivers must feel. This is real squeaky bum time for everybody in GT3.
Drive-through penalty for Liam McNeely for tagging Leo Machitsky into a spin, and also Fabien Jamblon is being given a drive-through for contact with Chris Hurker. So race control being kept pretty busy in this, as you might anticipate. So the pit window is not that far away as we contemplate the next element of this race. The pit window between 25 and 35 minutes. As up towards the line comes the GT4 fight. Tariq Gamil then goes through in the Porsche on the tail of Moritz Lerner, but 2 seconds up the road is Niels Naujoks in the BMW, looking really strong right now, continuing to build the lead. However, look who is behind Gregor Schill's BMW. It is the race leader now. So Michael O'Brien not only is in the traffic, but he's in that GT4 lead fight, and this is where life becomes very leery indeed.
It is the GT4 squabbling amongst themselves. Got to be very wary of GT3 traffic as Tariq Gamil keeps out of the way nicely of O'Brien. Next on the list for Michael O'Brien is Moritz Lerner, which he makes his way on acceleration. That's exactly where you want to pass a slower car, on acceleration. You don't want to be throwing it up the inside on brakes, but one person that will be interested in throwing it up inside on brakes is James Baldwin, that we're seeing now. The Fannin, Baldwin and Buncombe fight continues aplenty, and GT4s throwing themselves out of the way to give these guys a clear run. Fabulous stuff, fabulous.
That was Tariq Gamil getting it wrong and going out wide, and so now look, Gregor Schill has come through to gain the place. Angus Fender, who's not really part of that leading gaggle, again frustrated. Look, he's got nowhere to go. There's a Porsche on one side, there's a BMW in the way. Come on, he says, hurry up, I'm quicker than you, get out of the way. But Brands is not wide enough for all of this, so he has to wait. And now the grunt and go BMW charges past, but you can see how much more time he has lost relative to the McLaren Ferrari fight going on up front. And all of a sudden, Michael O'Brien has checked out, hasn't he? Because he comes across the line. He's now got a second and a half in hand over Jody Fannin. Niels Naujoks, though, is on his own pretty much as far as GT4 is concerned. All of that squabbling with the traffic behind, and of course the GT3 cars getting through, has really affected what's happened in GT4 and given him a bigger lead.
It has, and Alex Buncombe is now glued to the back of James Baldwin. So I was suggesting that Baldwin looked a little bit more comfortable in traffic just a few laps ago. This shows you how quickly things turn onto their head. Baldwin looking like the man that was going to make his way through into second position, but now under significant pressure from Alex Buncombe, and that gives Jody Fannin in the Ferrari that we're looking at this moment in time a little bit of breathing space to try and unlock some of the natural speed of that Italian machine.
So Jody Fannin, for the moment, as you say, has a bit of breathing space over the Baldwin-Buncombe battle. Fender is fifth. Bobby Trundley is in sixth place, looking pretty strong. He's had a couple of ninths so far this year as Bobby Trundley, but he's going well. Who has been a karting rival in the past of Jack Lemmer, who is currently 8th, Morgan Short between them. It's Tom Canning in 9th place, Adam Morgan 10th, and Sandy Mitchell's very, very good charge up from the pit lane, putting him in 11th place. You get points in the top 10, so he's still got a push. But of course, we've got 40 minutes still to go. We've had 1/3 of the race duration. What's going on in the GT4 fight as they come now down through Clark Curve? Well, Tariq Gamil is dropping back, isn't he? And about to try to find a way past is Angus Fender. I thought he'd got past them once. Why has he fallen behind them again? Has Angus Fender had a moment and been off the road? Kind of suggests he has, doesn't it?
It does indeed. I thought he'd gone through the traffic as well, so we'll keep our eye on that one. Race control will no doubt whisper in our ear exactly what's happening. But Tarek Gamel not showing the speed that I expected, but look how close GT4 are. You can still see Nils Naujoks at the top of the shot, so there's still all to play for, and we've seen it in previous rounds, haven't we, David? As soon as the pit window opens, if you don't attack that pit entry, and at Brands Hatch it's a very tight pit entry as well, there's time to be won and lost. Or if you pull an undercut or you hit the traffic just at the right time, what could be a comfortable lead now for Nils Naujoks in 15 minutes time could very, very easily be third or fourth position in class.
Very true. Now let's have a look from Alex Bunkum's point of view at dramas earlier on in the race, charging down towards Clark Curve, closing onto the back of James Baldwin and bang into the tail of him. I think Baldwin had to anchor up because he almost got a face full of Jody Fannin, who in turn had to be mindful of Nils Naujoks. There, back live, you see Tarek Gamil chasing up through Sheen Curve. The livery's not quite the same, but it does have echoes, that, of the 1970 Le Mans winning Porsche Salzburg 917 colour scheme that Richard Atwood and Hans Hermann ran, the red and white colours. As I say, it's not quite the same, but it has echoes of it. So Tarek Gamil with a nod to the history of Porsche here, coming through Clark Curve. But, of course, for his pole position in class, he's fallen a long way back, hasn't he? Look at the margin that has opened up, not only in terms of the cars, but the time as well, between where he is now and Nils Naujoks as the class leader.
He'll be incredibly frustrated, will Tarek Gamel. McGregor Schill just ahead of him in the BMW. Schill made his way past a few laps ago, so Gamel's still got everything to play for. But James Baldwin now, we saw him getting a little bit of a love tap in the rear from Alex Bunkum earlier on the replay, and now Baldwin again on the defensive from the sister McLaren. So James Baldwin doing everything he can to brake, accelerate and turn that 30 kilos as an extra balance of performance as efficiently as possible. And Baldwin flames up from the rear of the McLaren, is very much under pressure, but Jody Fannin only 6/10 up the road as well. So this is very much a three-way fight that's going to go on at least until the pit window opens in 4 minutes time.
So here they come out of Stirling's once again then, as there you look back and see the Tarek Gamil Porsche crawling all over the back of Gregor Schill, who is getting ever more defensive then, goes one side, goes the other. We've lost Maciej Malinowski's Alpine from that GT4 fight as they go through, but a great little battle this, and Sandy Mitchell is about to arrive on the scene, and he's in a sense bringing with him Jack McIntyre, who is going to be up with them before long as well. So there Sandy Mitchell splits the BMW and the Porsche, but have a look at the way that Jack McIntyre is going. That's Ben Green coming up to challenge as well. So those GT3 cars getting through the traffic, but then Ben Green is blocked because Tarek Gamil went for the apex at exactly the wrong moment. Nothing sinister about that. He had to turn in sooner or later, but now as you ride on board with Jack McIntyre, he is making really good progress all of a sudden, isn't he?
Yeah, McIntyre looking to the outside of Paddock Hill. Ben, he'll cut back to the inside to try and get the run up into Druids. Gamel, wary of that one, breaks on the apex, just covers the line immediately, giving no room for McIntyre. Looks around the outside. This is the longest way around the corner. That's not going to work for him. Gamel will run him out of racetrack, and now we've got Sam Neary in the background trying to thread the AMG Mercedes through that gap as well, close as you like between Neary and McIntyre, and high drama as we thoroughly expected at the start of this race, and it's unfolded exactly as we thought it would do. Drama everywhere you look, not least of which is Jody Fannin, now under pressure, doing a little bit of lawn mowing.
That was coming out of Stirling's, and of course that compromises the run here down through Clearways into Clark Curve, where James Baldwin challenges on the outside line. Wide in, tight out, tries to get the undercut now coming up towards the timing line. That's going to put him on the inside for Paddock Hill Bend. Now remember, that McLaren has got an extra 30 kilos of weight, and the move wasn't quite on, was it? Jody Fannin just able to claim the line for the corner. You've got Baldwin on the attack up the hill, and Alex Bunkum going one side and then the other to try to find a way past his teammate and to try to find a way past Jody Fannin in the Ferrari. Great battle this, but of course they're now 4 seconds back from Michael O'Brien, who is really storming away with the pit window imminent. We've got half a minute before the pit window opens as we have a look here at Angus Fender. Now, does this explain what he's been up to earlier on in the race, or does this show as Bobby Trundley on Nils Naujoks in the background? It's Angus Fender getting a little bit wide, but nothing too dramatic in the BMW at Westfield. Then into Dingledale and Sheen Curve, and all of a sudden it just snaps away completely, doesn't it?
Yeah, very, very easy to make that mistake at Brands Hatch. Hook a wheel onto the grass on turning, unstable the car, and then around you go. So sadly, Fender will not be the last person to pull off that particular manoeuvre at this track. And look here at this fight. Once again, you can throw a blanket over these three.
You can. That explains why Angus Fender had to go through the traffic a second time, of course. But as far as this group is concerned, well, Bobby Trundley's up to 5th behind them and Angus Fender down to 6th. But these three having their own private battle. And into the pits comes James Baldwin and Alex Buncombe. A very late call indeed by Alex Buncombe to dive in. Third generation racer is Alex, but he comes in on the tail of James Baldwin, serve the mandatory pit stop now, and of course that gets them out of the traffic, doesn't it?
It does, and that's a very smart move from Buncombe. So Baldwin making the pit stop, decided to shadow the sister McLaren as well. Really good idea from Alex Buncombe, not taking any risk, not allowing Baldwin to build a gap through traffic. And I'll be really curious now to see how they fare when they come back in and all the pit stops shake out in the next 9 minutes.
Alex Buncombe's had a slow pit stop, we understand, so that's going to cost him time. There he is, just leaving now, but that's cost him chunks relative to James Baldwin, and it'll be interesting to see at the end of the pit window where that drops him to in real terms. So Morgan Short comes in, Tariq Gamil comes in, Robbie Stapleford comes in as well, whose brother is Luke Stapleford, real world single-seater racer, and there they dive down through paddock. 41 is the KTM in the hands of Igor Ogrodnikov, and you can see just how busy it is. GT3, GT4 mix, they're heading up into Druids. So James Baldwin stopped 27 seconds, 33 seconds for Alex Buncombe. Big loss.
Yeah, that's a real shame for Alex Buncombe. That's time he cannot afford to give away on the racetrack, although there's still plenty of racing left to do. We've not hit the halfway mark yet. 33 minutes still on the clock as Rognikov starts to nibble away at the back of the car ahead, but Buncombe will be kicking himself for that, just missing his marker, missing his spot on pit road ever so slightly. And that is what we talked about, isn't it, David, at the beginning of the broadcast? A slow pit stop, either in terms of entering the pit lane or the stop itself, and that could be a big difference out on circuit. Sandy Mitchell now in P8.
Indeed, so Liam McNeely into the pits. We've talked about these drive-through penalties, by the way, being issued. They translate to about 20 seconds around this circuit, and there you can see James Baldwin then after his pit stop behind Sandy Mitchell. Now, in a funny way, I wonder whether the McLarens have done Jody Fannin a favour here, because no longer does he have to defend from them. So in theory, the next laps that he posts should be quicker. So how is that going to affect things at the end of the pit window? Without being defensive, he can, as I say, go faster, drive his race, not having to defend. So they've taken the pressure off him here, and they might have just helped his cause.
Yep, assuming that Jody Fannin's got enough tyre left in that Ferrari. He's been, as we say, under pressure for the duration of the first 30 minutes of the race, but now it's time for him to push as Manuel Rodriguez we're looking at on the outside of T1 in the beautiful liveried little KTM Expo sideways through Paddock Hill, still on the outside in a Druids. That one's not going to amount to a great deal, but Sandy Mitchell overtaken, allowing James Baldwin past, and that's just what Baldwin needs to continue his charge forward.
That's Sandy Mitchell around the outside of Adam Morgan in the Mercedes, and he does it, trims the lawn a little bit, but he gets through. So Adam Morgan, who had his first ever touring car win on the Grand Prix circuit at Brands Hatch, loses out to Sandy Mitchell and then gets caught in the traffic, so he can't challenge again at Stirling's. But Sandy Mitchell is absolutely flying here, isn't he? He has yet to make his mandatory stop, and in has just come one of the leading gagglers. We cut to GT4 action side by side there with Ogrodnikov, and also Manuel Rodriguez looking a bit more towy here. He gets up there with the Alpine. It's all happening, isn't it?
It is indeed, as Rodriguez goes onto the grass, keeps his foot in, bless him, keep nice and brave there on the outside. Not quite enough to take the position, but I believe we saw I think it was O'Brien that was down pit lane as well. Yes. So be interesting to see where O'Brien shakes out in all of this drama. And just to remind folks at home, 5 minutes and 50 seconds left. Every driver must make their stop before that counter hits zero and the pit window closes. And you can tell when they've stopped because of the little marker next to the name. Green means they've been down and served their stop, and orange with a 1 in it means they still got one stop left to go. And O'Brien is currently the front runner of those that have made their stop, with James Baldwin 2.8 in arrears behind.
It was a 28-second stop for Michael O'Brien, so fractionally slower than James Baldwin, but of course he'd pulled out the gap in the early part of the race. So right now Jody Fannin leads, but has just come into the pits. Now this is going to be really interesting to see where Jody Fannin rejoins relative to James Baldwin, who made a really good stop. There is 94 then, which is Michael O'Brien, who wants to inherit the lead back again. Bobby Trundley comes in, Angus Fender comes in. I think you're going to get pretty much everybody in at the end of this lap to get that stop out of the way, although does Jack Lemmer carry on for another lap? No, he Yes, he does carry on for another lap, so he will take over the lead. There is Jody Fannin, and is that going to drop him behind the Michael O'Brien McLaren? Yes, it does, but I think it's going to keep him ahead of James Baldwin. We'll confirm in a moment, but that looked like a good stop for Jody Fannin.
Yeah, that's worked out really nicely for Jody Fannin in the Ferrari. Comes back out again ahead of James Baldwin. It's going to take a little while to warm up his tyres and brakes after that short stop of 28 seconds, 28.3 to be exact. But Jody Fannin doing exactly what he needs to do to get ahead of James Baldwin. And just going back to Alex Buncombe, Buncombe's in 7th position at this moment in time, so it's cost big Alex Buncombe in terms of track position and real estate as Fannin actually is passed by Baldwin.
Yeah, he has. He's dropped back behind him, so it didn't really pay out for him. We know it was a good stop by James Baldwin, 27 seconds and change, so even taking the pressure off for a couple of laps hasn't really helped in the long run. So it was that 1 second faster pit stop that's really helped. It's catapulted James Baldwin ahead, but he's got the weight. So does this mean that the lighter Ferrari can fight back with 29 minutes effectively of the race still to go? It means that at the moment you've got Jack Lemmer yet to serve the pit stop, leading the way, and Michael O'Brien then will take the lead back. James Baldwin is second, and net, of course, the gap has come down between those two leading McLarens as they're through the traffic dives Jody Fannin. So it was a big gap between O'Brien and Baldwin earlier on, plus you had Jody Fannin between them as well. But in this second stint, it's a different order and it's a shorter gap between the two teammates in the McLarens.
And this is exactly what we were speaking about at the top of the broadcast, David, isn't it? That pit strategy, when you stop, how the traffic falls, how you attack your in and out lap can make a huge difference. And look at James Baldwin, not made the overtake on circuit, done it on pit road, and now is in prime position to start pushing.
Got out of the traffic, didn't he?
Yeah.
Really good slick stop. And those pit stops effectively controlled by you as a driver, aren't they? Not by anybody in your crew. You've got to do it yourself. So there you've got the battle on track as Alex Buncombe tries to squeeze past Adam Morgan, and he does so. Adam has got to make his pit stop yet. So single driver GT racing, of course, normally British GT shared cars, but it's one driver for the whole hour here. And interesting that it was a fuel issue, like the lack of, that did for Adam Morgan at Snetterton. That's something else, of course, that drivers and teams have to factor in. And many of them, I know, for example, the Barwell Lamborghini drivers, all taking this very seriously, spending a lot of time in the week talking to the engineers about the right setup and making sure that everything is not only set to help them get good results, but also to do as good a job with the setup of the car to get the results they want. This is not just something to do on a Sunday evening. This is taken very seriously indeed. As there you see, Niels Naujoks rejoining after his pit stop. So GT4 starting to shuffle a bit now.
It is indeed, and Naujoks had Moritz Lerner for company on pit exit, so Lerner having a great pit window cycle, closing down a couple of seconds faster on the stops, and now Naujoks is another driver under pressure, having had a really good opening stint to this race. We're going to see how he copes with that 10 kilo additional weight on board with Moritz Lerner, a driver himself, very, very talented, races in Formula One Esports and a number of high profile championships. Lerner is very much a man on the charge, and can he overcome Niels Naujoks, or has Niels Naujoks got enough in the tank to keep this race lead?
Yes, I'm going to say this is effectively the class lead, isn't it? Because even though they've dropped back on the pit stops, they will take positions 1 and 2 again when the likes of Boothby and Szymantyński, etc., serve their stop. So what you're watching here for 26 minutes is the lead battle with Moritz Lerner ballast free, 10 kilos for Niels Naujoks. This is Lerner's view. The other one to factor into this is Jack McIntyre, but he seems to have lost out quite a lot on the pit stops. He's fallen down the order once again. So it's Naujoks versus Lerner. 25 minutes, just under 26 minutes of the race still to go as Lerner in that McLaren comes through Clark Curve. So is this the better prospect, the lighter car, which perhaps therefore is easier on tyres and brakes over the course of 1 hour than the BMW of Naujoks ahead? We'll find out in 25 and a half minutes.
Yeah, I wouldn't put anything past Niels Naujoks. Very talented, very experienced eSport driver. Got an incredible amount of speed. Robbie Stapleford now is the man under pressure. 3 wide coming into T1. The little red Aston on the inside does not know what's happened as both cars fly past him. But look how dramatic, how close these drivers can race, as we've got a drama of Chris McDade, I think that was, in the big Chevrolet, going grass cutting on the inside and luckily avoiding collecting the cars ahead.
Yeah, just about got away with that as the cars now, 1 or 2 running rather wide, come out of Graham Hill Bend. Chris McDade there goes through as you see Robbie Stapleford keeping Tariq Gamil at bay. All of this, of course, after the pit stops. Pretty much everybody has made them now. The pit window is indeed now shut, so the race will go to the end from here, as Jack Lemmer, after his stop, is in 8th, just ahead of his teammate Sandy Mitchell. In fact, that could be another battle that goes right down to the wire. But of course, the race leaders have still got traffic to factor into all of this, and if you look in the background, you'll see the McLaren there trying to work its way through GT4. Sam Neary has got to drive through, possibly again in Sam Neary's case. I had a feeling he was in strife earlier, but he certainly has been in previous rounds, as there also Liam McNeely trying to recover from his drive-through, gets through the slower cars. So for the GT3 drivers, life is still a real challenge. It's very busy out there.
Yes, incredibly busy, and actually a big shout out to Stapleford in fourth position, in class in the Aston Martin. First time we've seen him in this championship. He stayed out of trouble, not really been much in the thick of drama, but to be fourth on track and very much in the fight for a podium place. Very, very good performance from Robbie Stapleford. Impressive how he's managed to keep everything together so far. We've got 24 minutes left on the clock, David, so that could all go very badly wrong very quickly indeed, but good drive up to this point from Stapleford.
And the best pit stop of all is that of James Baldwin, incidentally. Quickest of all of the pit stops, the worst, whisper it, was from Josh Hislop, new to the series as a hot laps qualifier. But James Baldwin taking that now to get onto the back, as you can see, of Michael O'Brien. So he is much quicker, seemingly, in this second stint. Catapulted up the order by a good pit stop, but James Baldwin now, never mind 30 kilos of weight, using all of that sim racing experience to very good effect, going after Michael O'Brien. And actually, with 23 minutes on the clock, you get the feeling that it is when, not if, that James makes his move for the race lead, don't you?
Yeah, James Baldwin has just unlocked a ferocious pace in that McLaren. Seemed to be struggling, well, relatively speaking, struggling in the first portion of the race, hovering around the third, fourth position. But a good pit stop, a bit of clear air, and all of a sudden, Michael O'Brien's comfortable race lead has become very, very compromised. And James Baldwin, on his tippy toes, looking like the man that's got the desire to take this race victory. So this will be curious to watch, won't it, in the next 22 and a half minutes left on the clock.
For the championship, not only is James Baldwin here going for yet another race win, a second of the year and a third on the road, but also championship rival Angus Fender is only 6th and Ben Green is 11th, and that means Paulie's out of the points. It's points in the top 10, so it's very much advantage Baldwin as far as the championship is concerned, isn't it?
Yes, it is indeed. The only close competitor in the good point scoring positions, Jody Fannin at the moment. Fannin 4th in the championship standings on 25 points. Baldwin, remember, 43 at this moment in time, but he's looking for another 25 to add to his score. So this is a big day for James Baldwin. Get a win here. Your championship rivals finish a little bit lower than they would so like, and then you've got a much more comfortable time of it heading into Silverstone in the final round.
Bear in mind, Michael O'Brien's car also has weight, not as much as James Baldwin. James is still the heavier car, but Michael's got 15 kilos, so there's a 15 kilo disparity between them, but it's the heavier car lapping quicker, doing the chasing, with the more experienced sim racer at the wheel. Michael O'Brien then, very talented young GT and indeed historic racer, had a win at the Goodwood Speed Week last year, comes now up through Clark Curve. Jack Lemmer and Robbie Stapleford are amongst the biggest gainers here in terms of places that they have taken compared to their grid spot to race position right now, as there, with what, 4 tenths between them, not only do O'Brien and Baldwin turn through paddock, but they've got traffic ahead. That is Liam Machitsky's Lamborghini up towards Druids, and is that back marker going to play a part as far as the overall race lead is concerned? James Baldwin, I just feel here, is biding his time, just planning when to strike. Look, he's absolutely on the back of Michael O'Brien now. This is a big ask for Michael to fend off, of course, the world's fastest gamer.
Yeah, incredibly difficult. And the difference between real and virtual motorsport, in virtual motorsport you're looking at a singular screen, so you've got to have keys mapped to be able to look left and right. You've not got the spatial awareness that you do in the real world, and now Baldwin closer than he's been for the entirety of the race, shadowing Michael O'Brien ahead. Where, David, can he find an overtaking opportunity?
I reckon it's going to be into paddock. I mean, he might force a mistake out of Michael like that, where they both run a little bit wide, but really start the move coming out of Stirling's, quick through Clark Curve and challenge it at paddock. That would be a suggestion. Now, James might have other ideas about all of this. Let's see. And of course, what he doesn't want to do necessarily is rush into the first possible opportunity, which might only be a half opportunity, because he's got a third of the race still to go. He does not have to be a hero at this corner, for example. If the opportunity presents, then yeah, okay, go for it. But James is savvy enough not to risk everything. He might, if the opportunity doesn't come, sit there, take the points, and of course lose 15 kilos of weight going into the next race. So yeah, he'd like the win, I'm sure, but he's not going to risk everything just for the sake of it. He's clever enough not to do that.
And that's actually a good bit of mental gymnastics for the drivers in the cockpit. Is it worth the additional points, 18 place 25, to have that extra 15 kilos at Silverstone, which is an incredibly fast circuit, a long lap as well? So that'll all be going through James Baldwin's head. Or will it? Or will the red mist descend and he's just looking for an overtake? We'll find out, but now Baldwin gets a much better run onto the long back straight. So is there any opportunity here?
There should be. He'll go to the outside line, wide in, tight out. The outside line is if you're really, really brave, and he doesn't elect to do that. There's traffic up the road. You're looking also on the inset at what's happening in GT4. So Michael O'Brien now really has to strike through the traffic. He can't afford the slightest hesitation, because otherwise James Baldwin is going to be up and past him. But the gap has widened a touch, hasn't it? Just coming up through Westfield and Sheen curve there.
It has, and something else that Baldwin's going to need to think about is O'Brien at this moment in time is not really in the championship fight. If he can make it past and minimise the time loss for O'Brien, that's another car between himself and Jody Fannin. If he pushes O'Brien into a mistake, and maybe, hopefully not, O'Brien drops the car on the track, that's giving Fannin more points as well. So all these little things, these little strategic thoughts will be going through the drivers' minds, and that's why these guys that we're looking at are different to us at home. They can think of this stuff and still pedal 3 seconds a lap faster than we can do, giving it full concentration. So credit where credit's due. Even though these are real world races, the adaptation to the virtual world has been mightily impressive.
It's a day for white and yellow cars, isn't it? Because a similar colour scheme, that's for Jack McIntyre. Look, you can see busy in the GT4 fight right now as the cars accelerate once again down towards Hawthorns. But to all action in GT4 as well as in GT3, where it was a fifth of a second between them last time. Right, let's go on board with Jack Mack as he comes up towards the timing line. That is Egor Ogorodnikov in the KTM just up the road ahead. And of course, all this is for position within GT4. But Jack needs to get on with this to make sure that he stays competitive for the next race. He's got to be in the top 10 in the race.
He does indeed, and McIntyre, we know, is a very talented, very fast driver. Ogorodnikov in the KTM. The KTM not necessarily the car of choice in GT4. A lot looser car than the Porsche. Requires much more muscling through the corners to get a good lap time out of it. You can see that. You can see how much Ogorodnikov's car is moving underneath him when you're looking from the Porsche. Now, so the Porsche has got the stability. That means it's going to have the tyre life as well, as we're looking at the insert as an overtake further down the running order. But McIntyre needs this position, desperately needs this position. And Ogorodnikov wasn't born yesterday, so he's going to keep the car on the racetrack, I am sure. And that's a very wide GT4 car as well. Look how big the KTM is compared to the very delicate Porsche in pursuit. So that's going to be a great fight to see if Jack Mack can find a way past in the next 16 and a bit minutes.
And he is doing exactly what James Baldwin is trying to do. Apply pressure, wait for a mistake to come out of the guy ahead. Except in James's position, it's for the overall race lead. Jack McIntyre much further back, of course, overall, plus within his GT4 class. But there, Michael O'Brien coming up to the Ginetta. He's going to have to think about how to get past that and not leave the door even ajar, never mind open for James Baldwin. Goes to the inside line, gets past the traffic, gets the line for Westfield, turns right, plunges downhill. 16 minutes are on the clock. Good defence this from Michael O'Brien. Now, whether James Baldwin is trying everything absolutely in every corner, you could argue, but either way, Michael is soaking up the pressure, bearing in mind his car is lighter, but James Baldwin is still there glued to his tail. Really good fight between these two.
It is. I am massively impressed with Michael O'Brien's performance. We've seen him run a little bit wide in the middle sector of the track, which is natural on this Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit, but he's making no mistakes. He's not defending fresh air. He's not throwing the car an extra 4-5 metres into the braking zone than he's been doing previously. And just like in the real world at Brands Hatch, if you keep it on the straight and narrow, you keep it nice and neat, it is incredibly difficult to overtake. As soon as you start trying to do things with a car that you've never done before and trying to find an extra second a lap that you've never had on the track to stay in front, that's when mistakes creep in, and that's when overtaking becomes much easier for the chasing car. So O'Brien employing all his real world intelligence and racecraft into this race so far.
for 6th in GT4, George Boothby versus Chris McDade here. So it is the Aston Martin just ahead of the Chevrolet. And overall, just a quick word about Jody Fannin, because even though those McLarens are squabbling and holding each other up, he's not really benefiting. He's struggling for outright pace for whatever reason, given that he qualified on pole. McDade to the outside line. This is a fight and a half, Paul.
It just seems so bizarre to see the massive Chevrolet at the tiny Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit. We're more used to seeing these kind of cars at places like Road America or Sebring in the United States, and McDade not letting that hold him up one way and then the other, runs too deep in a paddock hill bend, does well to keep it on the grey stuff, and that gives a bit of breathing space for our round 2 winner George Boothby to hold on for a little bit longer.
We're still looking good, aren't we, for 3 different winners out of 3 races in both classes, but we need Michael O'Brien's cooperation here to do that, to hang on to the race lead. So come on, Michael, don't let us down. He leads the way, only just from James Baldwin, nose to tail. But remember, James has a good advantage already in the championship. 2nd place here will shed weight, and he'll still bank a lot of points relative to Angus Fender, who is 6th, and Ben Green, who has now got into the top 10. So that's only 1 point for Ben. Still very much advantage James Baldwin, even if he were not to win this race. And look, we started talking about this lead battle nose to tail with 20 minutes to go. We're less than 14 now. They're still glued together, but still James has not found a way past Michael. Then the 2 teammates for Rocket RJN, the Bob Neville, Jenson Button, Chris Buncombe team, down towards Hawthorne they go. Is there going to be a chance for James Baldwin here? You're riding with him, he turns right, he's on the power, but still Michael O'Brien hangs on to the advantage, and James could not be any closer, could he?
Yeah, he's doing everything in his arsenal to try and find a way past the O'Brien car ahead. But like you say, David, does he go for points? Does he go for the race victory? We spoke to James Baldwin in one of the previous rounds, and he wants to win every single race in the series. As he goes to the inside, David.
Tiny error by Michael O'Brien in the traffic. James Baldwin gets up alongside him, and despite the weight, he's done it. He's gone through. Michael O'Brien fights back, then coming into Clark Curve, but I think it's now enough. James Baldwin has gone through and pulled 2 lengths already as they come onto the top straight. However, Michael O'Brien, with that lighter car, should have a slight edge in terms of outright speed. He's closing again as they dive into paddock. There's also more traffic up the road as well they're going to have to take into account. So they're still nose to tail, but there are more and more back markers. If Michael O'Brien stays on the tail of Baldwin, he might be able to fight back in the traffic, but it was a tiny error there coming up to lap that car that did for Michael O'Brien.
Absolutely beautiful opportunistic move from James Baldwin. He saw a gap. He wasn't even thinking about making the pass at that stage in the motor race. Then the gap presented itself. Instinctive racer's instinct to put the car in that space that's been presented itself. And the upshot is James Baldwin now our race leader, and Michael O'Brien, no fault of his own. That was very unfortunate timing. Drops down a second, but as you say, there's quite the gaggle of cars that they're approaching in GT4, so it's not over yet for O'Brien. Baldwin is going to be the first car, the first of the GT3 leaders to approach these GT4 cars. He's got to wake them up, and this is an opportunity for O'Brien. But if O'Brien's going to go any designs on victory, he needs to strike now. He cannot afford to let Baldwin stroke it up the road.
And let's see, because he's almost delayed in the traffic there, the Alpine gets in the way, Michael gets squeezed onto the grass, and that doubles the gap between them. So there are more back markers ahead they're going to have to think about as they come over the line, but the gap has markedly shot up there because that slower car got in the way, and all of a sudden Jody Fannin looks a little bit nearer, doesn't he? So can he take any advantage out of all of this? Suddenly, rather than being under pressure because of the traffic, it's worked exactly in James Baldwin's favour. The Alpine, I don't think, saw Michael O'Brien coming, got in the way a little bit, so now Michael's got to spend a lap or two trying to bring down that gap, and it's not going to be easy unless the back markers go against the race leader, and Jody Fannin is at least in shot now. He is starting to close. They're catching up to the 6th to 10th GT4 battle now, so life's going to get busy for Baldwin, no question.
Yeah, that was incredibly dramatic, and O'Brien did very, very good fortune to stay on the track. The first time in my commentary career I've thrown my arms up in the air, screamed, almost knocked my bottle of water over onto the laptop. That was, wow, heart in mouth stuff. And as you say, that allows Jody Fannin to start to close up and get himself involved in this fight as well. So this race has only got 10.5 minutes left on the clock, but I think there is plenty of drama to still be served up before we get the checkered flag at the end of the event.
So here they come then, now down towards Clark Curve once more. Look back from George Boothby's Aston. Chris McDade behind. And then you've got the quicker cars, the GT3 leaders, scything through the traffic. In GT4, it's still Neil Snowyox ahead of Moritz Lerner. The gap creeping up again with Gregor Schill in third place. And there is James Baldwin working his way through the traffic without drama. Michael O'Brien has shaken off again Jody Fannin, but not really closed on Baldwin. And James is getting past the traffic at exactly the right time, isn't he? Dive through, for example, there on the inside at Druids, and Michael O'Brien can't think about getting past until he's out of the corner, by which stage Baldwin's away and gone. So really frustrating this for Michael O'Brien, but James Baldwin is doing it absolutely right.
Yeah, it's funny, I was just thinking that as you were talking then, that O'Brien is hitting the traffic exactly the wrong spot every time. Nothing you can do about that as a driver. It's how the cards fall when you reach the back of the GT4s. It's entirely down to fate, and at the moment the cards are stacked against O'Brien, and Jody Fannin in the Ferrari that we're looking at now is ever closer. Fannin was our pole position sitter, remember, in GT3 at the start of this race, faded somewhat over the course of the event, seems to be coming back again a little bit. And the curious thing, David, is of course O'Brien and Baldwin both in McLarens, very similar car, they've got their own different setups, but they will use their tyres, they will use their brakes, and their balance will be broadly similar to each other. Fannin in a Ferrari, entirely different piece of engineering, may well be stronger at this stage naturally in the race than the two McLarens ahead, so that's something to look out for in the last 8.5.
Still intrigues me about the McLarens why the heavier one is going to be quicker seemingly than the lighter one. I mean, it's only 15 kilos, but it makes a little bit of a difference. How much of that is compensated for by James Baldwin's greater sim racing knowledge, we might find out in about 10 minutes if we get a chance to talk to the drivers post-race. As again, Jody Fannin has to be cautious through the traffic, gets up through passing Robbie Stapleford, regular esports racer, and Jody ran out wide there. Tariq Gamil next in that GT4 queue, so that puts him now into fifth in class. Tariq will be frustrated with this, won't he? A bit like Jody, actually. Good in qualifying, but the race pace hasn't been there.
Yeah, really surprised actually for Tariq Gamil. I firmly expected him to run away with things at the front of the field. This is Angus Fender now, 6th position behind Bobby Trundley. Trundley having another great race in the Aston Martin in 5th position, but Angus Fender will be hoping he can find a way to liberate that place from the Aston ahead. And then Alex Bunker, a further 16.5 seconds up the road, unfortunately a bridge too far in the last 7.5 minutes as we ride on board with Fender.
Bobby Trundley is on target for his best finish of the championship if he can hang on to 5th, but Angus Fender comes to the outside line at Hawthorns, rubs up alongside the Aston and squeezed out wide. Bobby Trundley then, part of the Team Brit operation, and goes into Westfield, still keeping the BMW at bay in GT4. Neil Snowyox getting away from Moritz Lerner, through passing the Chris Hooker Audi goes Trundley, and Fender again has to be careful. Behind them on the road you'll see is the Chitsky Aston as they power out of Stirling's now down towards Clearways. 7 more minutes remain on the clock, that is all. Bobby Trundley doing a good job here, isn't he, of keeping Angus Fender, the Oulton Park winner, at bay.
Yeah, Trundley once again always been impressive in the season so far, always in the heart of the fight. Does a really good job, good virtual racer, so it seems really adapted to this championship in impressive style. And as you say, 5th position, if he can hold on to it, will be his highest finish of the championship so far. And I'm sure Bobby Trundley, plenty of fans out there watching the broadcast, hoping and cheering him along in the Aston. So Trundley versus Angus Fender, as we've seen a stop-go penalty, 20-second stop-go penalty for Alex Buncombe ahead.
Absolutely right, so Alex Buncombe getting a stop-go penalty, Trundley and Fender nose to tail, and it is a 20-second stop-go for Alex Buncombe because of an incident involving car number 14, Manuel Rodriguez. So the McLaren clashing with the GT4 car, for which he gets a stop-go penalty. Fender in the meantime all over the back of Bobby Trundley, who's doing a very good job of defending. Gives Angus Fender the outside line, but that is not the place to challenge at Westfield. But again, he tries to go for the undercut, inside line through Dingle, down up towards Sheen Curve. Angus Fender should get his nose in front, go through the right-hander, and he does. Leans on Trundley a bit, who gets squeezed out wide over the dirt. But finally, Fender is through. These two, remember, tangled at Snetterton late race. They almost did it again there.
As close as you like, with a little bit contact as well, but Trundley survives. 6th position, that 6 will become 5th when Buncombe serves his 20-second stop-go penalty, of course. 4th position will go to Angus Fender, who's currently 5th on the racetrack. But regardless of this, still a great performance from both drivers as Machitsky unlaps himself, dives down the inside in the Lamborghini. Leo Machitsky getting involved, not for track position, but for real estate on the circuit. Machitsky thinks he's a little bit faster than the team Brit driver ahead. That's dangerous times now for Bobby Trundley. Doesn't want to get involved with a lap car. Leo Machitsky is not averse to facing the wrong direction. We've seen a few times so far as we go to a replay, David.
And let's see, is this Michael O'Brien in the traffic in... no, it's not. It's 24. This is Alex Buncombe's McLaren, and that's the reason for the stop-go, because that was pretty brutal, tagging the back of the Manuel Rodriguez KTM. So for that, a stop-go penalty comes for Alex Buncombe. I don't think for a moment it was deliberate. That's not Alex's style, but it certainly did for Manuel Rodriguez in the race, and hence a penalty comes. Now, there are the leaders, and that gap has come down again, hasn't it? There's half a second between them and 4 minutes on the clock. Can Michael O'Brien have one last push? Now that there aren't back markers around, does that give him the opportunity to go absolutely flat out and concentrate on catching his teammate? We're not done yet, are we?
Oh, this is exciting. The last 4 minutes, exactly what we needed to see. There's always a danger in this series. Having a driver, a bit of a unique, a bit of an outlier is James Baldwin. He's a professional real-world driver, but he's also got masses of virtual racing experience. There's always a danger that he would run away with this championship. And although he's incredibly strong in the championship points, each and every race has been a nail-biter down to the checkered flag. So this is not over yet, and O'Brien doing everything in his power to entertain David and I up in the box and the viewers at home as well. And I still think there's one last chance for Michael O'Brien left in the bag before this closes.
Leo Machitsky, you mentioned about facing the wrong way on a number of occasions over the course of the championship. I have a suspicion that he might be doing it again here, because coming out of Surtees, he got a little tickle in the tail from Bobby Trundley, and again the Lamborghini went around, and that's how we started the race, wasn't it, with a spin coming out of Surtees, and it's almost how he ends it.
Yeah, Leo Machitsky, Barwell driver, got a lot of sim racing experience, has his own rig at home, likes to do the virtual racing, but it's taken a while to adapt to that. I have to admit, it's a very difficult to drive Lamborghini GT3 car here in this simulation. And Machitsky, unfortunately, racing in close contact with others, a little bit of contact, as you say, and then around she goes.
Doing all of this from his base in Moscow. Sandy Mitchell for Barwell up in Scotland, Jack Lemmer at university, and in his room there doing all of this. You kind of forget, we're concentrating on Brands Hatch, but you forget where everybody is around the world doing all of this, not even all in the UK. Right, replay here of Tarek Gamil's view as he comes across the line in the Cayman, the 718 Cayman GT4 down towards Paddock Hill Bend. Frustrating race this for Tarek Gamil. And up front, it remains this battle between the two McLarens. Tarek Gamil's next task, really, is to get onto terms with the Robbie Stapleford Aston Martin, but he just can't stay close enough to him. Right, again, there's traffic, there's Baldwin, and O'Brien finds a slower car between him and the race leader, but clear of that traffic. It looks like he's got the pace. I think he's going to run out of time, but he's not taking this line down, is he? He is not giving up the fight.
No, he's not. Credit where credit's due to Michael O'Brien. He could easily have got disheartened when he lost that position to James Baldwin, but he's not. He's got the bit between the teeth, giving everything, wringing the neck of that McLaren to try and stay in touch with the number 23, James Baldwin, ahead of him. But as you say, I'm afraid the clock continues ticking. Nobody can beat the grand old mother time, and Michael O'Brien doing everything he can in this last minute and a half. And I'm afraid James Baldwin, as he laps, I think that's Adam Morgan in the Mercedes, runs a bit deep into the hairpin, and O'Brien still fancies his chances of throwing one down the inside in a do-or-die last-minute move.
Angus Fender has got to give a place back to Bobby Trundley after a bit of contact. So yet again, those two crossing swords late in the race. I said it at Snetterton, it's happened again here, and yet again, Angus Fender has to give the place back. Now, the question on this is going to be, can they squeeze one more lap out of the race? James Baldwin wants there not to be another lap. Michael O'Brien would like there to be, because it gives him another opportunity, perhaps challenging. And on the start of this lap, it was 0.4 of a second between them. It is virtually nothing at all as they go towards Westfield. We're almost at the end of the race, but I think they are going to squeeze one more lap out of this. And look, O'Brien is getting closer and closer and closer and closer. Further back, Trundley is ahead of Fender, but Angus Fender challenges once more and does go back through, and O'Brien all over the grass, and I think that has torn it. That's probably now cost him too much time to be able to recover.
Yeah, real shame, Michael O'Brien, I'm afraid. As you say, unless there is a monumental mistake from Baldwin ahead, that's the end of Michael O'Brien's charge for this race victory. But Bobby Trundley, we're saying he's kept out of trouble. He's making up for it in the last few laps now. He's got Morgan Short round the outside. So Trundley under pressure in 5th place heading into the last lap.
So he's lost out to Fender, who's gone storming back past him. Now Morgan Short comes up to have a go, and Trundley being given a drive-through. Now that, of course, is going to end up being a 30-second penalty post-race because there isn't the time to do it. The clock has hit 0, and so we're now on to the last lap of the race, and James Baldwin is over a second clear. He's on target for win number 2, isn't he? And he's done a really good job here. He didn't necessarily look the quickest in that first stint, but boy, after the pit stops, mega drive.
Yep, absolutely fabulous, James Baldwin, as we've come to expect. Got the pace, uses his intelligence to make the moves when necessary, and the end result is looking like it's going to be another 25 points and one hand, possibly 1.5 hands, maybe even a foot on the championship trophy.
As meantime, Morgan Short comes up to attack Bobby Trundley and does indeed attack going into Druid. Niels Naujoks is on target for his GT4 win. We'll come back to GT4 once we've got the overall drivers across the line, because it is looking good for James Baldwin for his 2nd victory of the season, chased by Michael O'Brien and Jody Fannin in 3rd place. They're on their last lap. Indeed, there on the inset is the race leader, soon to become the race winner, heading down through Clark Curve. James Baldwin then is set to win round 3 of the British GT Esports Championship. It is James Baldwin who takes the checkered flag, a 2nd win of the year. Michael O'Brien takes 2nd place. That's his best finish jointly of the season, equals his 2nd place, and Jody Fannin takes 3rd, equaling his best from Oulton Park. But what about Niels Naujoks? He's been unlucky in the previous 2 races, but this time around it's going to be a well-deserved class win, Paul.
It is indeed. Showed all the skill and talent that we know Niels Naujoks has. Carried that heavy BMW from beginning to end in a great performance.
So here he comes then, down towards Clark Curve. It's going to be Moritz Lerner and then Gregor Schill behind him, but an excellent drive that by Niels Naujoks. He's been, as I think I said early on, a little bit critical in the past of the GT3 drivers' driving standards, and said, I'm not sure I'm going to come back and have another go. Well, he has been a welcome addition again to the grid, and certainly as far as this race is concerned has done a great job, taking a maiden class victory. Moritz Lerner's best of the year, netting 2nd, first podium from him, and Gregor Schill, first time out, coming home for 3rd place in GT4, and we'll try and bring them to the interview room in due course. But another really interesting race. You could argue that yet again it's James Baldwin, but he certainly again had to work for that. James Baldwin, the race winner, Michael O'Brien 2nd, Jody Fannin 3rd. The result, 4th Angus Fender ahead of Morgan Short, and then Bobby Trundley in that 6th place. But of course a penalty is heading his way, because the time has to be added on at the end, because he couldn't serve that the drive-through penalty. So that will become a time penalty added on at the very end of the race. So the order is going to shuffle accordingly. So James Baldwin, Michael O'Brien and Jody Fannin the top 3. Angus Fender 4th, Morgan Short 5th, Sandy Mitchell will be 6th therefore, 7th for Jack Lemmer, 8th for Ben Green, Alex Buncombe 9th after his stop-go penalty, and Tom Canning taking 10th position. GT4 in the end, claimed by Niels Naujoks from Moritz Lerner, and then Gregor Schill in 3rd place. We'll try and, as I say, have a word with Niels in due course. But first of all, let's also try for James Baldwin. Let's see which one we get first into the interview room, because James and Niels are there. Niels Naujoks, GT4 winner. Paul, he's all yours.
Niels Naujoks, GT4 winner at Brands Hatch. How does that feel at long last, the first race victory? Congratulations.
Oh man, thank you. This is pretty cool, because we had a tough day yesterday in the 12 hours of Bathurst. So yeah, that feels twice as sweet.
Yeah, fantastic performance. We saw you pretty much untroubled in the first stint, then under a bit of pressure at the second half of the race. How was the BMW? 10 kilos of additional weight on it. Seemed to have handled it in your stride.
Yeah, we didn't have too much time to practice, because we were again focusing on this endurance race, and yeah, we did a bit at the beginning of the week and then came back to it just this afternoon. relied on the setup that Gregor has already made, but we had no clue what the opposition would do. All we had was the leaderboard, and it looked like the Porsche would be quite strong. And when I was on pole, I thought, okay, maybe second place is what I can take away with here. But yeah, eventually seems like the Porsche struggled a bit more in the race, and I think I made it stick somewhere, turn 3 or so. And yeah, from there wasn't easy, but seemed unthreatened.
And the upshot as well as the race victory, the 25 points that come with it. Jack McIntyre had a difficult race, didn't score particularly highly, and Luca Burke is missing from today's race, having not qualified. That puts you in a very strong championship position heading into the last 2 races of the season.
Is that a question, or you're correct?
Yeah. Do you think you've got what it takes then, 30 kilos at Silverstone, to push for a championship challenge?
I'll have to see, because I'm just not aware how the BOP looks on every track in GT4, because they're not driven so much, have a bit of a knowledge gap there. So we'll have to see how it works out in Silverstone. And yeah, of course, with 25 points ahead or something like that, of course, looks comfortable. But yeah, just needs one dropout or so, and then they're right back there.
Yeah, and final question from me, Nils, if I can. Obviously, you've got a guaranteed place on the grid for Silverstone next time out, courtesy of the top 10. What sort of preparation are you going to be putting in place for the penultimate race of the year?
I guess probably, now that it looks quite bright, probably a bit more than we did this week. Even if, or especially when the BOP might be tricky for us, then of course we got to find something to get more time out of it, or yeah, just squeeze a bit more out of the car as a driver. So probably a few more hours going into that this week to, well, someone in this room won't like it too much.
Well, a fantastic performance, as you say, not easy, but at the end of the day, dominated from the front of the field. Congratulations, Nils Naujoks, race winner at Brands Hatch for round 3 of the British GT Esports Series.
Cheers.
And that was
so well done to Nils Naujoks. Really impressive drive, that, and as you say, Paul, sets him up nicely in the championship, doesn't it?
He does, yeah, a great performance, and it was good for Nils that the scores of his rivals were particularly low, but another man that had an absolutely barnstorming race is James Baldwin. So David, our race winner, second time race winner of the year.
Well, yes, it's obviously Sunday night, time for our regular chat with James Baldwin, because second at Oulton and now 2 wins. James, you've done it again. Fascinating race, that, because the second stint looked a lot easier, dare one say, certainly faster than the first stint. So what was the strategy? Talk us through it.
Well, yeah, we've got a really bad start, and then Michael, Jody and Alex got past, but yeah, the only kind of... it's so hard to overtake at Brands. Yeah, I had to deploy some sort of undercut just to try something different, and fortunately it paid off. Had a good pit stop and had a bit of contact with the car during the middle stint, which gave me a bit of rear diffuser damage, which is why at the end my rear tyres were gone, so it was a bit tough. Michael pushed me very hard as well, so yeah, probably the best race of the year so far. Definitely really enjoyable.
You're right about the traffic around here. I mean, it seemed to be that on some occasions it worked in your favour, others, Michael got a little bit of an advantage and closed in, but that must be a nightmare for a driver, because you're trying to look ahead, look behind, and so much going on. Yeah.
I don't know why, because obviously I did this race in real life last year. This felt a lot harder. Now, obviously I had the lead last year, but I don't know why. Like in real life, because you're there, you can kind of see cars and anticipate situations probably a bit easier than you can on the sim.
Okay.
So that was more stressful.
What was the weight doing? I mean, your car was heavier than Michael's by 15 kilos. Does that make a big difference? Because, again, it proved to be the faster of the two.
I think from 0 kilos ballast to 30 kilos was about 3/10 around here, because there's quite a lot of hills and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I've got it next week as well. The car does feel different as well. It's not just like you're slower. It feels a bit more sluggish in the corners. So, yeah, it's an interesting dynamic though.
What about Silverstone next week then? 30 kilos there, fast but flat circuit.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think it wouldn't be as detrimental. And I've heard the McLaren is great around Silverstone, which is good news. But yeah, we'll see. Looking forward to it.
Oh, that's just chipping up the opposition. Crikey, so you go there with 30 kilos and an even quicker car. That's going to send them to sleep. Well, thanks very much, James. Yeah.
Mind games, mate.
Absolutely. A really good drive. Helped you in the championship. Again, increases the advantage. Well done. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
So James Baldwin takes a second win of the season, our first double victor. But yet again, Paul, a race of high drama, and we've still got 2 more, of course, to go in the championship.
Yeah, it's been absolutely phenomenal. I find myself saying this every Sunday evening at this kind of time, but it really is one of the most enjoyable championships I've seen or been involved with. And I worried, Brands Hatch being the difficult circuit that it is, especially with multi-class racing, some new drivers that we're not as familiar with, part of the qualification process, that we'd have more accidents than we would racing. But I think it's fair to say, David, that the behaviour on track has been superb from GT4 and GT3.
Has indeed, absolutely, and you can see, can't you, that the driving standards get better all the time. There's inevitably the odd incident, but of course next week we go to a longer circuit, a wider circuit, a faster circuit, a very different type of circuit at Silverstone, and it's going to be interesting, of course, to see what happens not only in the races but how that affects the championship, because sadly we're almost at the end, only 2 more races to go. Can anybody put one over on James Baldwin in a week's time?
Yep, fantastic stuff. And for everybody at home, just to remind you, if you want to be involved in this championship as a driver, Hot Lap qualifications open tomorrow at 8 a.m. BST in Assetto Corsa Competizione. So if you can set a fast time, you will very much be invited to be a part of the GT4 grid. But for all us folks at home that don't quite have that magical lap pace in our back pocket, you can catch David Addison and myself on the GT World YouTube channel, same time, same place, on April the 11th, Sunday, April the 11th, for the 1 hour of Silverstone, the penultimate round of the British GT Esports Championship. And before we say goodbye, one final thought from David Addison, and then we'll sign off for the night.
Final thought would be that the championship gets better and better, doesn't it? Because the racing is excellent. We're having different people up at the pointy end. The unpredictability is the only thing you can predict in this championship. And James Baldwin, yes, he might be winning races and he might be racking up points, but he can't say that any race this far has been a walk in the park. And long may that difficulty in his victories, if you like, continue, because it's giving us, Paul, some great action.
It is indeed absolutely fantastic. So make sure, everybody at home, that we see you next time out on Sunday the 11th of April. And from David, sat in the dark, and myself at home, have a lovely evening, and we'll see you later. Take care. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.